I got home earlier than usual tonight. My meeting had been canceled last minute, and the roads were eerily empty. I've always loved that unexpected quiet drive, but tonight something felt off before I even pulled into the driveway. As I approached, I noticed Amanda's car in the driveway, a sight that immediately made my stomach drop. Amanda always said she'd be burning the midnight oil at the office, not parked at home. It was as if the night had whispered secrets I wasn't ready to hear. Stepping inside, I tried to shake off the creeping sense of dread that had begun to build up during my drive. I called out for Amanda, half expecting a familiar, reassuring response. Instead, I was met with silence and an unnerving stillness. When I reached our bedroom, the sight of the windows startled me more than anything. The curtains were drawn tight, concealing the room from the cool night air. Amanda had always left them wide open, letting the gentle glow of the city and the stars in. Now, the darkness behind those fabric veils seemed to hide more than just the outside world. It felt like it was hiding secrets of our own. I stood there for a long moment, caught between confusion and a growing worry that something was terribly wrong. The ordinary comforts of home had shifted, transformed into a stage for an unfolding mystery. With my heart pounding, I realized that nothing about tonight was as it should be. I didn't know what was waiting for me in the shadows, but I knew one thing. The unexpected homecoming was only the beginning of a night that promised to upend everything I thought I knew about my life. The house was deathly silent as I made my way through the foyer, the kind of silence that gnaws at your nerves and makes every step feel like a misstep. I kept expecting to hear the familiar hum of the TV in the living room or the clink of dishes in the kitchen, but there was nothing, only an oppressive quiet that pressed in on me from every corner. It felt as though the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. I paused at the base of the stairs, listening intently. Faintly, almost drowned by the quiet, I heard muffled sounds coming from above. They were too indistinct to be clearly understood at first, but as I inched closer, I could make out the unmistakable cadence of a man's voice. The voice was low, with an undertone that suggested both intimacy and mischief. Then, as if on cue, a light, almost musical laugh, a laugh that was unmistakably Amanda's, filled the space between the shadows on the landing. My heart pounded as I ascended the stairs slowly, each step heavy with dread. Every creak of the wooden steps echoed through the silence like a forewarning drumbeat. With each step, the reality of the situation began to crystallize in my mind. This wasn't just any sound. It was the sound of betrayal unfolding right above me, and I was too stunned to turn back now. Reaching the top of the stairs, I hesitated in front of the slightly ajar door at the end of the hall. I took a deep, steadying breath, summoning a resolve I didn't know I possessed. I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside, and what I saw nearly shattered me. There, in the dim light of our bedroom, Amanda lay tangled in the arms of another man. The scene was surreal, like a snapshot from a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The stranger's features were blurred in my tear-filled vision, but his presence was enough to make my blood run cold. In that moment, anger surged through me. A toxic cocktail of betrayal, hurt, and humiliation coursed through my veins. I didn't have time to think, only to act. I stormed into the room, my hands instinctively reaching for anything that might serve as a weapon. The man barely had time to register my presence before I swung a heavy object, a decorative paperweight that had always sat on the bedside table, striking him squarely on the head. He crumpled to the bed in a heap, his body going limp in a way that seemed almost too easy. Amanda's eyes snapped open, wide with shock, before narrowing into a look of fierce indignation. "Mark, what are you doing?" she demanded, her voice laced with an anger that was as bewildering as it was piercing. Her tone wasn't one of apology or sorrow. It was accusatory, as if my intrusion was the true betrayal in our relationship. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, struggling to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the one now standing before me. "You weren't supposed to be here," she continued, her words spilling out in a rush. "You never pay attention. You were always too wrapped up in your own world to notice what was really happening around you." Her words stung, and I felt a bitter twist of irony in them. Here I was caught off guard by her infidelity, and now she was turning the tables, accusing me of neglect and obliviousness in our own home. The room seemed to shrink around me as I searched for words, for any way to understand what I was witnessing. I felt my pulse thrumming in my ears, drowning out her voice as my mind raced through memories of missed calls, forgotten anniversaries, and the subtle shifts in her behavior that I'd chosen to ignore. Had I been so blind, so utterly absorbed in my own life, that I failed to see the unraveling right before my eyes? Amanda's tone softened for a fleeting moment, as if she were trying to justify her actions with a shaky mixture of remorse and self-defense. "I thought you'd be busy, or that you wouldn't notice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The softness of her words belied the sharpness of her betrayal, and it sent a new wave of hurt crashing over me. I looked away for a long moment, the weight of the night pressing down on me as I tried to piece together the shards of my broken trust. The air in the room was thick with unspoken accusations and unanswered questions. Every second stretched out interminably, each tick of the clock a reminder of the time I had lost and the life I thought we shared that was now in ruins. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the soft, labored breathing of the man I had just incapacitated, and Amanda's continued murmurs of justification. I felt an overwhelming urge to scream, to demand answers, to force her to confront the betrayal head-on. Yet, even as my anger burned brightly, a part of me recoiled, terrified of the truth that might be waiting just beneath the surface of her words. It was then that I realized I was standing at the crossroads of a life that had suddenly become unrecognizable. I had walked into this room expecting solace, only to find a labyrinth of deceit and shattered expectations. And as I stood there, caught in the wake of a single, devastating moment, I couldn't help but wonder, had I really been so blind, or was this betrayal something I had ignored for too long? I left the apartment in a haze of disbelief and anger, my mind a swirling storm of betrayal and regret. Every step away from that shattered room felt like I was walking further from the life I once knew. Yet something inside me, an insatiable need for closure, or perhaps revenge, demanded that I return. I couldn't let the moment slip away without gathering the evidence I needed to expose the web of lies that had ensnared me. Back at my car, I sat in silence for several minutes, replaying the events over and over in my mind. The shock of Amanda's betrayal was still fresh, but a colder, more calculated part of me was already plotting. I needed undeniable proof, something that would reveal the full extent of her deception. I drove back home, my thoughts drifting between anger and the grim satisfaction of a plan beginning to take shape. Once back inside, I methodically combed through our shared digital life. My fingers trembled as I unlocked Amanda's phone, one of the few things she had carelessly left behind in our bedside drawer. I wasn't normally one to snoop, but tonight, every call, every message was a potential clue to the truth. I navigated to her call log, scanning through countless entries until one number caught my attention. It wasn't the same number Amanda had casually mentioned to me in her web of half-truths. No, this number had been dialed hundreds of times over the past 6 months, a staggering frequency that demanded scrutiny. I sat back, staring at the display, my mind racing with questions. Who was this mysterious contact? The number itself was a string of digits, unremarkable at first glance, but it held the key to unlocking the identity of her secret lover. With a mix of determination and dread, I entered the number into a search engine. The results came back with a single, unyielding name, Derek Bailey. The name stung, its impact amplified by the revelation that Amanda had never mentioned him. Lucas was the name she had used as a shield, a convenient lie to mask her deception. Now, Derek Bailey was thrust into the spotlight, his identity becoming the first tangible piece of the puzzle. The search didn't stop there. I dug deeper into Derek's background, learning that he worked at an elite gym renowned for catering to the city's most affluent and notoriously flirtatious women. The gym was the sort of place where the lines between professional fitness and indulgent vanity blurred, where rich clients flaunted their wealth and sought more than just a workout partner. Derek's clientele wasn't just about fitness. It was about exclusivity, luxury, and the kind of high-stakes social dance that Amanda had apparently been a part of. It wasn't hard to see the allure. In that world, every encounter was wrapped in secrecy, and every smile was a potential mask hiding ulterior motives. As I absorbed this new information, a cold clarity settled over me. Amanda hadn't merely betrayed our marriage. She had woven herself into a life that thrived on luxury and deception. Derek Bailey wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was a symbol of the double life she'd been living, a life I had been blissfully unaware of while I naively trusted her. The revelation was both painful and oddly empowering. With each detail I unearthed, the scales began to tip in my favor, turning my initial shock into a burning resolve for revenge. I meticulously documented everything. Screenshots of call logs, search results, even a brief note about the gym where Derek worked. All of it was archived with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about reclaiming the truth, about laying bare the lies that had been told. I needed to build a case not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever doubted the reality of betrayal. In that moment, the darkness of the night became my ally. The silence of my home, which once echoed with the remnants of heartbreak, now hummed with the promise of retribution. Every piece of evidence, every digital footprint, was a stepping stone toward confronting Amanda with the full weight of her lies. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was constructing a narrative of betrayal that could not be ignored. With the phone evidence secured and Derek Bailey's identity etched firmly in my mind, I knew my next steps would be fraught with even more complexity. Yet, as I sat in the dim glow of my computer screen, I felt an unsettling sense of control. The first step to revenge had been taken, and there was no turning back. My life, once a tapestry of shared memories and quiet routines, had been irrevocably altered. Now, I was determined to expose every hidden detail, to peel back the layers of deception until the truth lay bare and undeniable before me. The journey ahead was unclear and treacherous, but as I closed my laptop, I resolved that I would not be the victim any longer. With every revelation, I was reclaiming a part of myself that had been eroded by betrayal. And in the depths of that dark, silent night, my resolve hardened. This was only the beginning of a path that would lead me to answers, and perhaps, in the end, to a form of twisted redemption. I spent the next few hours combing through Derek's online presence, my eyes glued to his social media profiles in a fevered search for any clue that might further expose the tangled web of lies. It was when I stumbled upon a seemingly innocuous photograph, Derek laughing with a woman, that I paused in disbelief. The caption read something that made my heart sink. Together for 8 years. The woman was identified as Sophie. I couldn't fathom it. Sophie, a name that hadn't come up until now, was clearly someone important to him. And if Derek had been able to maintain an 8-year relationship with her, it meant that his secret life with Amanda was built on layers of deception even deeper than I had imagined. Every post and comment on his profile painted the picture of a devoted partner. Sophie's pictures, filled with smiles and candid moments, were a stark contrast to the life Derek had been leading behind closed doors. The more I scrolled, the more I realized that Sophie had no inkling of his duplicity, and that her trust was as solid as anyone's could be after 8 years together. A part of me felt a pang of guilt for intruding into her world, yet I knew that she deserved to know the truth as much as I did. Determined to set the wheels in motion, I gathered my courage and pulled out my phone. With trembling fingers, I sent a text to Sophie that read, "Hi, we don't know each other, but we need to talk." I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and the grim satisfaction of exposing a shared betrayal. For what felt like an eternity, there was no response. I kept refreshing my messages, each minute dragging on in painful uncertainty. Finally, a reply popped up. "Who is this?" Read her first message, short, clipped, and laced with suspicion. I hesitated for a moment before replying with as much honesty as I could muster. I told her about Amanda, The night I came home early, the call logs, and the undeniable evidence that tied Derek to a hidden affair. I explained that I had discovered Derek's real call history and that Amanda's version of the story was a complete fabrication. Her initial reply was a mixture of incredulity and caution. "Are you serious? I can't believe this," she typed, her words punctuated by several ellipses. I pushed further, sending screenshots of call logs, search results, and even photos from Derek's social media that corroborated my findings. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Then, suddenly, her tone changed. The next message arrived in all caps. "What the hell? How could he?" There was a raw, unfiltered anger in her words, a storm of betrayal that resonated deeply with me. She bombarded me with questions. Where did I get this information? Why was I telling her? How long has this been going on? With every question, it became painfully clear that Sophie was not just surprised. She was furious, her trust in Derek now shattered. I explained every detail as best as I could, recounting the events that led me to uncover the call logs and the secret number. I told her about Amanda's deceptive alibi and how everything pointed back to Derek. The more she read, the more her initial disbelief turned into righteous indignation. Her messages poured out, full of hurt and betrayal, emotions I recognized all too well. In her furious responses, she declared that Derek had been living a lie, that everything they'd built together was a sham. Every piece of evidence I sent only confirmed her worst suspicions. What struck me most was the immediacy of her reaction. Despite never having met before, Sophie's anger was palpable, and her determination to confront Derek was as fierce as my own desire for retribution. In our digital exchange, we found a shared enemy, a man who had manipulated not just one, but two lives with his carefully constructed facade. It was a bitter revelation. While Amanda had spun her own web of lies, Derek had been running a dual operation, deceiving Sophie with one life while indulging in another. Our conversation soon evolved from cautious verification to a mutual agreement that we couldn't let Derek continue this charade. Sophie was livid, her messages becoming sharper and more resolute as she vowed to face him head-on. I reassured her that I was in this for the long haul, that together we might be able to piece together every hidden truth. It was a surreal moment, two strangers united by betrayal, embarking on a quest for justice. As I ended the conversation for the night, I couldn't help but feel a grim sense of camaraderie. The shared anger and the unyielding determination to expose Derek's duplicity had forged an unexpected alliance between us. Sophie's fury had awakened a new perspective in me, that this wasn't just about my own betrayal by Amanda, but about a much larger network of lies that had ensnared innocent people. In the quiet aftermath of our exchange, as I lay in the dark, I realized that our lives were now irrevocably intertwined by the need to confront a deceitful mastermind. The first cracks in Derek's elaborate facade had been exposed, and there was no turning back. The truth was out, and soon we would force it into the light, no matter how much it hurt. I spent the next few days locked in a whirlwind of plans and preparations, fueled by a potent mix of anger and determination. Sophie and I had quickly discovered that our shared betrayal wasn't something we could keep to ourselves. There was a far bigger network of lies at play, and it was time to expose it to the world. Sophie, with her marketing expertise, became the linchpin of our operation. She worked at a prestigious firm where her role gave her access to corporate communications and internal chats, a resource she had never thought much about using for personal matters until now. With her connections and insider know-how, we devised a strategy that was both bold and uncompromising. We would launch a massive public exposure, targeting everyone from the intimate circles of our personal lives to the far-reaching corridors of Derek's professional world. Late one evening, I sat down on my computer, gathering every scrap of evidence I could find. I meticulously compiled screenshots of phone records, saved emails, and even recorded snippets of audio from Amanda's voicemail. Every piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of the false reality I had once believed. With trembling hands, I began sending messages to Amanda's family and our mutual friends. People who had always been in the dark about the simmering tension beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect lives. Each message was accompanied by damning evidence that could no longer be ignored. I felt a mix of vindication and sorrow with every ping of a sent message. The truth was finally coming out, and there was no turning back. At the same time, Sophie was deep into her own mission. In a secure, discreet conversation with one of her trusted colleagues, she shared the details of Derek's double life. Using her internal channels, she sent compromising information, screenshots of corporate chats, internal memos that hinted at his inappropriate behavior, and confidential details about his interactions with high-profile clients, to Derek's boss, his colleagues, and even a few of his most important clients. She knew the repercussions would be seismic. The corporate world, with all its carefully maintained facades, had no place for a man who not only deceived the women in his private life, but also betrayed the trust of his professional community. As the hours passed, the fallout began to take shape. My phone buzzed nonstop with responses from friends and family, their shock and disbelief mingling with outrage. I received messages of support, along with declarations that the truth had finally caught up with us all. Meanwhile, Sophie's efforts were making waves on multiple fronts. Derek's superiors and clients, once enamored with his charismatic presence, were now questioning his integrity. The internal chat logs, now in the hands of those who cared about the company's reputation, painted a damning picture of a man who had been living a double life. Then, almost as if orchestrated by fate, a post began circulating on social media that set our plan into its final, irrevocable motion. The message was succinct, yet it cut deep. Be careful. This personal trainer not only teaches you how to pump muscles, but also how to sleep with other people's wives. It was a post that quickly went viral, resonating with countless individuals who had their own stories of betrayal and deceit. The post wasn't just an attack on Derek's professional reputation. It was a full-scale exposé of the hypocrisy and cruelty of his actions. Comments and shares piled up by the minute, and the online community was abuzz with anger and disbelief. It felt as though the whole world was finally waking up to the truth. I remember the moment I saw the post. It was a surreal mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because, at last, justice was being served in a way that felt both public and personal. Sadness because I couldn't help but think of all the lives that had been touched by this web of lies, including my own. The public exposure was more than just a revenge tactic. It was a cathartic release for the years of hurt and deception I had endured. In the days that followed, the impact of our actions rippled outward. Amanda's family confronted her with evidence she could no longer deny, and Derek found himself isolated from the very community that had once celebrated him. Sophie's professional world, too, began to shift as clients and colleagues demanded accountability and transparency. For me, the experience was transformative. While I had set out to reclaim my dignity, I discovered that exposing the truth had a far greater power. It could bring about collective healing, even if the process was messy and painful. As I reflect on those turbulent days, I know that the path we chose was not one free from moral ambiguity or regret. Revenge, after all, is a double-edged sword. Yet in our case, it was a necessary act, a stand against the deceit that had threatened to consume not just me, but many others. The price of truth is often steep, but sometimes exposing the lies is the only way to reclaim your life and protect those who deserve better. In the aftermath, I've learned that sometimes the darkest betrayals lead to the brightest revelations. And as the online chatter continues to surge, I remain both vigilant and hopeful, watching as the pieces of our shattered worlds are slowly, but surely, put back together in a way that honors the truth. I decided to take control of the narrative once and for all, setting the stage for what would be the final act in this twisted drama. I arranged a family dinner, inviting relatives and old friends, people who'd long been caught in the undertow of our messy lives, whether knowingly or not. It was a cool, crisp evening, and the dining room was softly lit, lending an almost serene backdrop to what was destined to be anything but peaceful. As everyone mingled and exchanged the usual pleasantries, A palpable tension hung in the air, a secret that, unbeknownst to most, was about to shatter the carefully maintained facades around the table. I clutched my glass of champagne, feeling the weight of the moment. This dinner wasn't just a reunion, it was a reckoning. When the chatter had subsided enough for attention, I stood up, feeling all eyes turned towards me. I raised my glass and began, my voice steady but laced with icy determination. "Amanda, don't you want a drink? Is it because of the $5,000 antibiotics?" A stunned silence fell over the room. I could see Amanda's face drain of color instantly. Her parents, sitting beside her, especially her mother, turned pale, every expression of familial pride and concern collapsing into horror and disbelief. The room seemed to contract around us, the hum of conversation dying down to an almost suffocating hush. Before anyone could react further, I continued, letting the final blow land with all the precision I'd honed over the past few days. "Oh, don't worry. Her boyfriend Derek got his surprise too. Right, Sophie?" At that exact moment, the double door at the back of the room creaked open, and Sophie appeared. She was holding her phone, recording a video as if to capture every second of the truth in high definition. The look on her face was fierce, part vindication, part sorrow, but unmistakably determined. Her presence was the final piece of our plan, an undeniable symbol that the lies we'd been drowning in were finally exposed for all to see. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. The room hung in suspended shock. Amanda's eyes darted from me to Sophie and back again, as if trying to calculate the gravity of the moment. Her parents exchanged troubled glances, their expressions a mix of betrayal, confusion, and regret. I watched as the faces around the table shifted, some hardened by years of unspoken truths, others now filled with an unmistakable sense of betrayal. It wasn't just a dinner anymore, it was a public declaration. I could see the storm of emotions roiling beneath the surface. Some guests looked ready to defend Amanda, still clinging to the remnants of the version of events they believed, while others, perhaps with secrets of their own, met my gaze with a mix of sympathy and something that might even be called relief. The conversation was no longer just about family ties or old memories. It had morphed into an open trial, with every attendee now a jury weighing the evidence of deceit. I took another sip of champagne, feeling the cool fizz of the drink echo the chill of our collective reality. "This," I said slowly, "is the truth. We've all been blind, and I refuse to let it go any longer." My words, though measured, carried the force of a final verdict. I could see murmurs ripple through the room, the shock gradually giving way to anger, regret, and even a twisted sort of admiration for the audacity of exposing such long-buried lies. Sophie, still recording, stepped forward as if to lend further weight to our revelation. Her expression told the story of someone who had been deceived but refused to remain a victim. With her calm yet resolute voice, she began outlining what she'd uncovered. Details of corporate chats, the reality behind Derek's charm, and the evidence that painted a damning picture of the man who had once been admired by so many. At that moment, everything became clear. The dinner table was no longer just a space for polite conversation and shared meals. It had transformed into a courtroom where the truth was the only judge. I felt a rush of grim satisfaction as the reality we had painstakingly assembled before everyone could be acknowledged. The final blow had been delivered, not with violence or bitterness, but with the cold, hard logic of truth exposed to all. As I looked around, I could see that nothing would ever be the same. Lies had been upended, and the fallout would be immense. But as I took in the charged atmosphere, the shocked eyes, the whispered comments, the dawning realization of a shared betrayal, I knew that this moment, as painful as it was necessary. It was time for every lie to be unmasked, every deception to be laid bare, and every person affected by this treachery to finally see the truth. That night, as the echoes of my words slowly faded into silence, I realized that reclaiming my dignity had never felt so bittersweet. There was no going back now, only forward, into a future built on the wreckage of our past and the relentless pursuit of a truth that would no longer be denied. The fallout was swift and unrelenting. In the days that followed our public reckoning, the house became a battleground of final judgments. Amanda's silence was shattered when her own family turned their backs on her. I watched almost dispassionately as her parents, once so eager to shield her from life's hardships, refused to extend even a sliver of financial support. The home that she had once so brazenly occupied became a prison of her own making. With nowhere left to turn, she was forced out. Her belongings hastily packed, the echoes of her desperate protests fading into the night as she slunk away with nothing but the bitter taste of her choices. Across town, the consequences for Derek were even more severe. The evidence we had unleashed left no room for escape in his professional world. The corporate emails, the chat logs, the public outcry, they all converged into an avalanche of disapproval. One by one, his high-profile clients severed ties, and his gym, once a temple of modern fitness and luxury, became a glaring reminder of his duplicity. The phone calls stopped coming, and soon he found himself isolated, his job terminated with a curt message of unacceptable conduct. His reputation, once bolstered by charm and cunning, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones among former colleagues and clients alike. Sophie, too, found her resolve hardening in the wake of these revelations. The truth of Derek's double life had cut too deeply, not only betraying her trust, but also shattering the foundation of the relationship they had built over 8 years. The weight of his deceit became unbearable, and one evening, as he pleaded for another chance that he knew in his heart he didn't deserve, Sophie packed her bags and walked away. With that act of defiance, she left Derek with nothing. No partner to stand by him, no shared history to cling to, just the cold, echoing silence of a life built on lies. For me, the final blow was less about tearing others down and more about reclaiming what had been taken away, my dignity and my freedom. The house that once symbolized both comfort and betrayal now felt like a chapter closed. I gathered my belongings, each piece a silent testament to the tumultuous journey I'd endured, and left the place behind. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, there was no lingering regret, no yearning for what could have been. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of victory, a liberation from a web of deceit that had once ensnared my every waking moment. Walking away from that house, I carried with me not only the scars of betrayal, but also the strength forged in its aftermath. I had emerged victorious, free from the suffocating grip of a life dictated by lies and manipulation. Each step I took was lighter than the last, a stride toward a future where truth and integrity would be my only companions. The pain, the fury, and the heartbreak had all led to this moment of clarity. I was finally free. And in that freedom, I found a quiet, resolute joy, a promise that tomorrow would belong to me, unburdened by the ghosts of yesterday.